Good evening, everyone. I'd call to order the meeting of Town of Islip Planning Board for Wednesday, December 6, 2023. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you are here for item number 1 on the agenda, Don Hodgkinson, that has been adjourned. And if you're here for number 8 on the agenda, Barone Management LLC, that also has been adjourned. Remind applicants to keep their presentations to 30 minutes or less, and remind members of the community if you'd like to speak on an application that's listed as a public hearing, there are yellow cards on the table to my left. Please fill one out and we'll call you up during those presentations. We ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And I also want to welcome our newest board member, Brad Wilson, to the planning board. And with that, we stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So our new first item on the agenda is planning board application, public hearing. Matt Giuliano, PB 2023-035, north side of Express Drive North, approximately 675 feet west of Rannoch Road, Hop Hog, 1745 Express Drive North. Applicant requests a modification of site plan modification conditions associated with PB 2022-024 in order to modify the language of the cross-access and shared parking condition. Good evening to the applicant.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. Randall Weichbrot, 144 West Main Street, Bayshore. We were here approximately a year ago coming in for, I don't want to say a change of use, but a clarification of use. He had previously been limited to indoor recreation, sports training for appointment only. He wanted to expand that, do haunt rooms, various other recreational opportunities, which are now listed under the code as permitted under indoor recreation use. In the site plan modifications that were a result of that approval, there was additional conditions regarding shared parking, shared access, which were somewhat redundant, repetitive. They're already addressed. So the property owner has come back and thought if we could either amend or eliminate one of the conditions from the prior site plan conditions, which hadn't been executed. The new conditions that Kelly had provided to me are acceptable to both the landowner and the tenant. So we'd like to just move forward and approve those and execute them and move forward.
Excellent use of time. Thank you.
Yeah.
As anyone who wishes to be heard on this application, I don't have any cards. Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The application was heard last year to convert the building into an indoor recreation for an escape room facility with 6 escape rooms. Tonight, the applicant's looking to modify the site plan modification conditions associated with that application in order to eliminate the need for a cross-access agreement. The applicant is still proposing to provide 52 parking stalls on site and is still proposing to have a shared parking agreement with the property to the west to allow for additional parking if needed. Indoor recreation uses do not have a set parking calculation. The required parking is determined by this board. The number of parking stalls is still remaining the same as previously proposed, and the proposed conditions require the application to come back before the board if a parking problem does occur. So based on this, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Any questions from the board? Anything further from the applicant? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Brown?
I would like a motion to close the public hearing and grant the application.
Motion by Mr. Brown to close the public hearing, grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions.
Yes.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Moriarty. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstentions. The application is granted. Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda, planning board application, public hearing, AGMRI Inez LLC, PB 2023-036, northeast corner of Inez Drive and Spence Street, Baystra, 5 Inez Drive. Applicant requests 2 planning board special permits for the outside overnight parking of registered vehicles and unattached box trailer pursuant to 68-340.1C and P. Site plan modifications are also requested as part of the application. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you. Oh, you know what? Can you do this too? Thank you. Anthony Guardino, partner with the law firm of Farrell Fritz, Hopog, New York, representing the applicant, AGMRA Inez LLC. My client is before the board tonight seeking approval to add 2 loading docks to the north side of an existing warehouse building and to modify the existing parking lot to create parking spaces for 9 spaces for the outside and overnight parking of either registered vehicles or unattached box trailers, and also associated striping, curbing, and drainage. This will require 2 special permits, one for the overnight outside storage of the registered trucks, and another for the overnight outside storage of no more than 10 unattached box trucks, and also site plan modifications. I have with me Andrew Stolzenberg, who's a professional engineer with BB&V. Joe Farkas from AGMRA Inez is behind me in case the board has any questions. Just briefly, the site is 6.3 acres in size. It's at 5 Inez Drive in Bay Shore. It's on the northeast corner of the intersection of Inez Drive and Spence Street. It is located in the I-1 district of the town. The property is currently improved with a 1-story, almost 94,000 square foot warehouse building that is currently occupied by a tenant who is going to be vacating shortly. All of the adjoining properties are also zoned I-1, and those properties are improved either with industrial and office uses. There are no residential properties adjacent to this site. The nearest residentially zoned property appears to be more than 200 feet away, and the nearest actual home is a little more than 400 feet away. So as I said, we're proposing to add the 2 docks and to expand and rehabilitate the parking lot, repave it, restripe it, create these 9 parking spaces for the overnight parking and storage of registered vehicles or unattached box trailers, and also there's a parking lot there for employee parking. As you know, the 2 special permits, they both have their individual requirements for the storage of registered vehicles. All the vehicles have to be set back a minimum distance of 50 feet from any street, also 200 feet from any residential use or zone, and the vehicles have to be, or the spaces have to be properly screened from view with fencing and or landscaping pursuant to the direction of this board. This application, the site plan, complies with all of those requirements. For the second special permit, that is for the storage of unattached box trailers, the criteria is roughly the same. No trailers can be located in the front yard or in the second front yard setbacks, and no trailers can be visible from the right of way. They also have to be set back 200 feet from any residential use, 50 feet from any street, and they have to be completely screened, etc. Cannot have more than 10 unattached trailers, and the configuration has to be safely designed and approved by engineering, and the vehicles have to be registered. Again, this application complies with all of those requirements. With respect to the site development standards, the site plan exceeds all of the required landscaping requirements. We're proposing 24.3% of overall site landscaping, where the code requires 20%. And then 73% of the required landscaping will actually be in the front yard, where the code requires 50%. The only site plan modification we need is for parking. 151 spaces are required. 127 standard and accessible spaces are being proposed on the plan. And then finally, Ms. Wozniak was kind enough to send me the proposed conditions for both the site modifications and the special permits. I've discussed them with my client, and he finds them to be acceptable. I have nothing further. I
Thank
don't
you.
know if you want to hear from the engineer or if you.
If you're okay with it, why don't we go to public comment, which I don't have any, then staff report, and if we have questions from the board, if that works?
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I do not have any cards on this application. Anybody come in later wish to be heard? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The property is located on the northeast corner of Inez Drive and Spence Street in Bay Shore, and it's improved with the 93,000 square foot warehouse building. Tonight, the applicant's requesting to park tractor trailers and unattached box trailers on the northeast corner of the site. The overnight parking location is set back over 200 feet from the street, and landscape screening will be provided along the street frontage where possible. The property is located within an industrial area, and the trucks and trailers are proposed to be parked in the least conspicuous spot on the site. The application will also require a minor 16% parking relaxation. Overall, the plan proposes to improve the site by increasing landscaping and providing compliant parking stalls. Based on this, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Anything further from the applicant? Is there a motion? Mr. Moriarty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would make a motion to close the public hearing and grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions.
Motion by Mr. Moriarty to close the public hearing and grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions. Was that a second, Mr. Matamore? Second by Mr. Matamore. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The application is granted. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, Planning Board application public hearing, 584 Main Street Islip LLC, PB 2023-038, south side of Main Street, State Route 27A, 38 feet west of Willow Avenue, Islip, 584 Main Street. Applicant requests a planning board special permit for a hair salon in the General Service T District pursuant to 68-489.1B, along with site plan modifications. Applicant also requests permission to allow less than 75% of the first floor area to be comprised of non-retail commercial space pursuant to 68-493B. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the applicant, Tom Abate, A-B-B-A-T-E. I'm an attorney with offices at 88 Sunnyside Boulevard in Plainview, and tonight's application concerns a premises before which we came before you the summer before last. The site is 584 Main Street. It's a roughly 12,300 square foot parcel, about a third of an acre, on which sits a freestanding building housing a hair salon, a separate dwelling, and a detached garage. When we came before you, our plan was to demolish the detached garage, convert the dwelling into a mixed-use building of offices and apartments, and keep the hair salon precisely as it is. Because it was our intent to keep the hair salon, and going through the process, it was discerned by planning that a special permit was never issued for the use, despite the years and years for which it's been in existence. So that's one of the reasons we're here tonight. The second item is that under the subdivision and land use regulations, after we executed the covenants, after Mr. Bolson, John Bolson, who was here with me this evening, was the property owner, executed those conditions, we were hit with the subdivision land use requirement that the overhead utility wires be buried on site. And we're looking for relief from that. And then the third item, as the chairman called out, is the less than 75% of GFA of first floor non-commercial, non-retail commercial. So you're authorized, obviously, under 68-493B to issue that relief. But when I was dealing with Ms. Wozniak, she had our project architect, Nick Pfluger, who's here with me this evening, provide some calculations. And while you are authorized, there's a base threshold beyond which you cannot go, and that's 50%. So we're below that 50%, so it's off to the zoning board for that relief, which is not a hardship for us because we have some other incidental items, but it's no longer for consideration tonight. So of the two items that remained, it's the hair salon and the overhead wires. Let's start with the first, which is the hair salon. Under 68-489.1B of our code, hair salons are conditionally permitted in the GST zone in which this premises is located. And in fact, the statute calls it out by name. Hair salon, doesn't even put it under a general category. It says hair salons are conditionally permitted. So that being the case, then we have to satisfy the standards for all planning board special permits under 68-34B of our code. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I posit to you that just by the history of the hair salon's existence, we show compliance with those standards. And the reason I say that is when Mr. Bolson purchased this lot in August of 2019, he inherited a 10-year lease for that salon. That lease is now expiring and subject to a favorable decision by this board tonight, it will be renewed. So in its 10-year history, and by the way, there are many who have a personal recollection that it existed well before, even 10 years ago. The nature and the character of this area has existed, grown, and developed with the hair salon in its midst. Consequently, the impacts, if any at all, have already been absorbed by the community. I will also add, without complaint. There is no complaint registered on file regarding this hair salon, as deep as I could look within the town records. That conclusion, I think, also applies to our residential neighbors, but with respect to them, I will also say it's already been impacted, but our residential neighbors are to the south of the site. The hair salon, of the three structures that are on this property, the hair salon is the one that fronts all the way up on Main Street. So it's the structure that's farthest away from the neighbors. Moreover, from an aesthetic, from a visual, and from a sound attenuation perspective, the residential neighbors, and those would be the ones behind us and the ones across Willow, are also buffered by the Meridian Lofts building, which abuts our site, also owned by Mr. Olson, and by the affirmative act of this board when you granted Meridian, because you had us put in a sound attenuating wall between us and the residential neighbors, as well as significant evergreen screening, both of which exist today. So they then lessen the impacts on our residential neighbors. Probably the most impactful of these standards would be traffic and parking. So I will again echo that which I've already said, that the impacts have been felt, but I will remind you that when we came before you in June of the year before, last year, that we had provided to you a formal traffic and parking study prepared by Jeff Lazarchuk of R&M Engineering. By necessity, Mr. Lazarchuk's report included the impacts, the peak hours of operation, the parking demand of the hair salon as our overall proposal, and reached the conclusion then that there were no negative impacts. And indeed, you issued your approval resolution based partly upon that expert testimony. If you would like, I have a copy of that report, but I believe that it is part of your file, but I can offer it up. So that's really all I have to say with respect to the hair salon. I think it's an a fortiori conclusion that we comply with the standards, basically because of its long history and that expert testimony and documentation which we provided. That leaves us with the overhead wire issue. And while I do not disagree with that regulation in our subdivision and land use regs to get utility wires buried, as a land use attorney, I think it's a very salient thing to do, with the caveat that it really is only applicable or feasible when you're doing a new development, a new building, a new project, a subdivision with new houses. Here, it bears noting, and something that I said to you numerous times when I first came before you, we are not adding a single square foot to either of the two buildings which are going to remain on this property. The hair salon is going to remain unchanged. The dwelling, it's all interior renovations. Not only are we not changing the footprint, we're not adding a single square footage going up, a square foot going up, rather. So consequently, it's an arduous requirement for us here. It's going to be enormously costly. And because the site is not vacant, because it's not a new building where we're ripping down the old and building a new, the equipment cannot be staged on site. That means we're going to have to get a New York State work permit because Montauk Highway, Main Street, is a New York State roadway. And that's going to then negatively impact both vehicular traffic and pedestrians in and about the site. It's not a quick process. Not only do we have the wires, which go from the edge of our property all the way down to the corner of Willow, they'll have to be removed. We have not one, but two poles on site, which will have to be removed. Then trenching will have to be done. And then the new wires put in and attached and made serviceable. This could be a very long and arduous process on a small project like this, and it is small. It probably would render this project economically unfeasible. So for those reasons, we're looking for relief from it. That's my case, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, unless you have any questions. Aside from Mr. Pfluger, I also have Mr. Andy Stolzenberg from BBV as our engineer.
Thank you. Let's go to the public comment staff report. We'll come back for questions.
Great.
Barbara Voris.
Good evening. Barbara Voris. I live at 85 Bunnell Avenue. I'm south of Montauk, right by the library. I'm president of the Old South Islip Civic Association, and we were contacted by the neighbors because they have concerns with the modifications and the relaxations on this property. I looked at the site plan that was on the website, and I'm concerned with the opening up of the parking area and the relaxation. If the ordinance says that we need 25 parking spaces, I'm confused why we're going down, relaxing it to 6, and why we're opening it up and sending more traffic to Willow yet again. The buffer, I think the requirement's 25 feet, and now we're going to 5 feet with the sound screen and the trees. It's just not really ideal for the poor residents that have to be south of the facility. I'm sure it will look nice, but the onus now becomes, it's now the residents that have to complain when we have the parking. So you do a traffic study on a hair salon that's in existence, but you can't do a traffic study on apartment building because no one's living there. So we anticipate, as always, that we're going to be the people that have to enforce or constantly complain to the town that, we're having parking problems. This has been the same quality of life issues that we've been facing in the town every time we relax the current ordinances that we had in place. So I'm just hoping that the town planning board will look a little more carefully. I looked at the environmental study. It was a short form. I'm wondering about why it was a short form versus a long form. I made some notes, and it seems like that there's a variance that would be required to even have this go forward. And I'm not sure that the residents even had any time to really wrap their head around this design or the plan. So thank you for letting me speak for 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Richard Cizik?
Yes, this is my 5th or 6th time coming down here with concerns for I live on Willow Avenue, 54 Willow Avenue. And every time there's more work to be done by the Bolsons, we are the ones that pay the price. I don't know if I heard it correctly. There's a need for 24 or 25 parking spaces and you're allowing 6. Now, when the Meridian went up, that was supposed to have like 20 and they've got like 12. And my numbers are probably off, but there's constantly a need for a relaxation of all these different rules that have been in place throughout the years that up until today, they all fall in the favor of the Bolson family and their efforts. Now, indisputable, they do beautiful work, tellers, everything is done well. Not even questioning that. What just seems to be always the issue is, who cares about the people on Willow Avenue? If you need 24 spaces for this particular property and you're allowing 6, where are these cars going? 18 more spaces, where are they gonna go? They're not gonna go to Manel or wherever it is, but they're just gonna come down Willow and there'll be the situations where people are parking in front of your driveway and it creates nothing but constant conflict. I thank Sean for alerting me to this, that we have a situation going in tonight, because I didn't hear anything about this before that. Because the sign you put up, whoever put the sign up, you can't even see it. It's in the one of the bushes. So I don't think a lot of my neighbors even saw the sign that there was a hearing tonight. There's only a few of us here from Willow Avenue. I don't think that diminishes our concern for what's going on, because a lot of the neighbors said, please say something for me. And obviously that's where we stand today, listening to what's going on. I just think there needs to be something else done as far as this property being enhanced for whatever use you're going to have. And I'm not really sure, and I understand the beginning of what it was going to be used for. I heard something about offices on the bottom and apartments on the top. Well, for today, and what the gentleman just said, there's no need, no requirement or no need to enhance this building. But 3 years from now, there will be, and we'll be back here again, and we'll be going up and out and everything else, because that's the way things are done. You get your foot in the door, and then you just make it bigger and bigger and bigger, and that will happen, as we all know. So hopefully, you're taking into consideration the neighborhood that we've, over the last 40 years I've been living here, every single situation has always fallen against the neighborhood and for the person or the group that's trying to enhance themselves. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Sean Wallace.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Sean Wallace, 24 Willow Avenue. I'm the property that's directly adjacently south to both Meridian and 584. My one request, and I've had multiple conversations with the property owner, he was nice enough to include me. We've discussed things from the Meridian project to this project, is just some signage when they're leaving or exiting the lot to try and deter them from turning south down the block. It is a residential neighborhood. I have 5 children. My wife and I moved here in 2000, and this is where we raised our family. So I asked, he can't really tell me he can do signage, so I'm asking the board for some signage that says no, maybe no right turn or have to turn left. And then my other concern, like, it's just lighting, just making sure that the lighting faces to the north and it doesn't protrude. Right now, there's some lighting on Main Street, has nothing to do with this project, but in front of Chase, some halogens that were put up that are very obtrusive to the neighborhood. They light up the sky at night, and I'm trying to deal with that with PSEG and Chase. But that's really my only concerns. Thank you.
Can I just ask you, the lights, the Chase lights, are they the street lights or are they lights on the Chase property itself?
Well, from what I've gathered and the research that I've done, you have the lighting in the town that's done by the town, which is very quaint and nice and gives full lighting. You have the drive-through on Chase, which is well lit, but there's 2 halogens that were put up by PSCG at the request of Chase, which they pay the bill, obviously for safety, but the lighting, if you had to look at it, I have pictures because I walk in the early morning or late at night, the light that it shines to the back south to the residential neighborhood is pretty obtrusive. And it shines in the bedrooms of the neighbors. And so I'm in contact with PSCG to try them to either lower the lighting, change the lighting, remove the lighting, but they own the pole, so I don't know that the town has the ability to get involved and do anything about it.
Okay, if it's PSE&G, you probably don't, but if it's something to do with the Chase property, we'll certainly look into it.
Okay, thank you.
Those are the only cards we have. Anybody else who came in late wish to be heard on this application? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The property came before the board last October to obtain parking buffer and landscaping relaxations, which were granted. Upon further review of the site plan application, it was determined a special permit was required for the existing hair salon, the 1-story building. The site plan reviewed by the board last October calculated parking for the hair salon. However, the salon was never CO'd, so a special permit is required. In addition to the special permit, it was determined that the first floor area of the main building didn't meet the commercial space requirements. However, after further review, the applicant must obtain this relaxation from the zoning board, as they are requesting to allow less than 50% of the first floor area for commercial space. Therefore, that portion of the pole can be removed. The applicant is also requesting permission to allow existing overhead utilities to remain, as they are not proposing any new additions or buildings and only conducting interior alterations and site work. Based on this, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Ms. Frugier?
I just have a clarification for planning, what exactly we're voting on. Because are we voting on parking relaxations at this point, landscaping relaxations, or is it simply a special permit for the hair salon and the waiver of the requirement to put the utilities on the ground?
It's just the hair salon and the waiver of the overhead utilities. The parking, buffer, and landscaping relaxations were already granted.
Okay, that's my understanding.
Ms. Wozniak, the sign issue that was brought up, can we work with the applicant or with town and put in those signs as requested by the neighbor?
Yeah, I can add a condition to the.
We absolutely agree to put a no right turn exiting onto Willow. Mr. Bolton absolutely agrees with that. And I've gone over the conditions with Ms. Wozniak and we concur with those as well.
And the lighting needs to be obviously compliant with town code.
Absolutely.
If not,
Absolutely.
back before us.
Yeah, there won't be any washover or any problem that he's experienced with Chase will not be endemic to this at all. Meridian doesn't have any lighting problems for our neighbor there, and nor will this.
Further questions from the board?
Chairman.
Mr. Brown?
Yes, yeah, Kelly. And back, I guess it was in October and everything, where we approved the original application. At that time, it was in a pre-existing hair salon, which has been in operation for many years. And that was the reason for the relaxation on the parking, because it had been the hair salon, nothing changed, correct?
Yeah, the hair salon, from what I understand, has been there for a while. They just never got a certificate of occupancy.
Right,
It's
so it had been
staying.
operating as a hair salon. The parking was sufficient for that hair salon with the relaxation, which is what we did back in October, I believe, when we granted it. And tonight, we're looking at the underground utilities, and we're looking at the special permit for a hair salon. Okay,
And just one thing I want to clarify, the buffer in the back is not changing, correct?
Correct, it's not changing.
We're not lessening the buffer.
Sorry?
We're not making the buffer any less than it currently is, and there's very little there as it is, but. Yes, Mr. Brown?
yep, for the applicant, what is the difference in the building today from if this is granted right now, before you go to zoning, what's the difference in this building today that we're granting, except for the utilities outside and the permission? There'd be no change in the physical characteristics of the building or anything?
For the hair salon building, no change whatsoever. With respect to the mixed-use building, it's not going to change in size, either footprint or height. There will be some window changes, very minor at that. And instead of being vacant, which it was when Mr. Bolson bought it, it will have 2 offices up front and 5 apartments in the balance of the building. But they
As
will
is-
look exactly the same.
Right, okay.
Are there further questions from the board? Anything further from the applicant?
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
And are we, as one of the conditions, we putting the signage in there? Are we just taking as, you have the signage condition? in? Let's just add it in, so it's not just a verbal agreement that there is a condition in there on that.
Great. Thank you.
Is there a motion? Mr. Frugieri?
I'll make a motion that we close this public hearing and grant the approvals for to legalize the hair salon and the waiver of the requirement to put the utilities on the ground.
The motion by,
Subject to the conditions and the one added condition with the signage.
motion by Mr. Frugieri to close the public hearing and grant the application to permit the hair salon, as well as to not have to put the utilities on the ground, subject to the covenants and restrictions with the additional restriction or covenant in there regarding the signage. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Moriarty, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Thank you. Item 5 on the agenda, Town Board application recommendation item. U-Haul Company of Long Island, CZ 2023-012, west side of Lincoln Avenue, approximately 1,556 feet north of Church Street, Holbrook, 1110 Lincoln Avenue. Applicant requests a modification of covenants and restrictions associated with TC 5211 and a planning board special permit for the overnight parking of registered vehicles pursuant to 68-340.1C. Site plan modifications are required as part of the application. Good evening.
Good evening, Matthew Elward with R&M Engineering, offices at 50 Elm Street in Huntington. We were before the board in October to present this, and at that hearing, in August, and at that hearing, 2 items came up. The building was 37.5 feet, and it was too close to the north property line. So what we did was we reduced it to be more compliant. We reduced it to 35 feet to comply with that side yard setback. Additionally, there were comments on the colors used in the new building. We modified those colors to more fit with the superior architecture of the 68-3 definition. And that was really the only thing that's changed since we were here the last time. We have the covenants and restrictions, and we agree with them.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The applicant summarized it perfectly. So with that, the staff recommends that the board grant the application subject to the attached covenants and restrictions.
Any questions from the board?
Comment.
Mr. Brown?
Driving by this property, I don't live that far from it and everything. You're surrounded by scrap yards and everything, and it's a beautiful looking older building that's it's in very good shape. And I have no issue with this application whatsoever.
Thank you. Anything further from the board? Is there a motion? Mr. Moriarty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd move to grant the application subject to the conditions and restrictions.
There's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions, second by Mr. Brown. All in favor? Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item 6, planning board application decision item, Menino Brothers 1575 Realty Corp. PB 2022-025, north side of Montauk Highway, State Route 27A, approximately 100 feet east of Forbes Street, Oakdale, 1575 Montauk Highway. Applicant requests a modification of planning board special permit conditions associated PB 2016-028 in order to expand an existing restaurant. Site plan modification may also be requested as part of the application. Good evening to the applicant. We're glad you're here tonight because we keep putting this off for you to get here.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Raymond Justo, 715 South Country Road, Bay Shore, New York. I just want to indicate that I have not been handling this application. Joe Deal from Bowler has done the heavy lifting. He couldn't make it tonight. I'm Mr. Menino's attorney. I agreed to be here. Mr. Menino's here tonight, as well as Dave Bittner from Bowler Engineering, in case you have any questions. I understand this is on for a decision tonight, and I just wanted to notify the board, we received Kelly's latest set of conditions. We agree with everything, and we're ready to go.
Thank you. Ms. Wasney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since the previous hearing, the applicant has provided written comments regarding the lease of parking spaces to the sushi restaurant and has stated that the owner does not maintain any current lease agreement with the sushi restaurant to allow them to use parking stalls. At this time, the applicant would like to proceed with the application as presented using the parking lot for their own use. In addition to this concern, the neighbors brought up concerns regarding light, noise, and traffic at the previous hearing. Therefore, conditions were drafted to address these items, which include providing an 8-foot fence along Commercial Avenue, subject to ZBA approval, and to work with traffic safety to install signage along Forbes Street and Commercial Avenue to deter parking and through traffic on those residential streets. Based on this, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you, Ms. Wasnick, and thank you to the applicant for dealing with those issues that were raised by the community. Are there any further questions?
None.
Is there a motion?
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
Brown?
I'd like to make a motion to grant the application subject to the CNRs being executed.
It's a motion by Mr. Brown to grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Matamore. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted.
Thank you very much.
Town Board application recommendation item, BSL East Islip LLC, CZ 2022-018, northeast side of East Main Street, State Route 27A, 213 feet east of Greenwood Avenue, East Islip, 17 East Main Street. Applicant requests a change of zone from Residence A District and Business 3 District to all Residence C District, and a modification of covenants and restrictions of TC 589 in order to construct an assisted living facility. Site plan modifications are requested as part of this application.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Michael McCarthy. I'm an attorney with offices at 444 New York Avenue in Huntington. And we were before the planning board as it pertains to this request for the zone change. It seems like a long time ago, but it was September of 2022. And we discussed the application, which is before the board. We're here tonight, hopefully with a favorable recommendation by this board, which would allow for the change in zoning classification of the bowling alley property, which is 4.3 acres, from a combination of business and residential zone to residential C. BSL is an affiliate of Benchmark Senior Living, and Benchmark Senior Living is one of the leaders on Long Island of assisted living. I think we're all familiar with the aging demographic of Long Island in general and Islip Town in particular. And it was felt that it would be a great location for a senior living facility. The residency zone was changed by town board legislative action on July 20 of 2021, just prior to the time that I had appeared to the planning board in September of 21, which makes an assisted living facility an unconditionally permitted use in the residency zone. I could go through the particulars of the plan, but I think you have your planning staff report. I could go through the particulars of the architectural features. I think you're familiar with it. We think it'll be an enhancement to the community. But two very, very important points that I want to underscore, because I know that this board is very concerned about it. One is that you had heard comments from some of our business neighbors, the post office, the bagel store, and I'm sorry? Yeah, Shannon Court. I apologize. I couldn't remember the name. So we've made an affirmative commitment that we'll make at least 30 parking stalls available to these business entities. So that, we can, if we get a favorable approval and we move forward with the zone change and actually build the benchmark, we will be able to provide the parking that our neighbors have been accustomed to. So we've been in conversation through the planning department. The second thing that I think is also very, very important is, I work with Sean on the conditions, as every other attorney has, stepped up and indicated. And, we accept the conditions that would be associated with a change of zone. We hope you like the plan. We hope that we'll get a favorable recommendation. We'd like to move forward with a public hearing at the town board, and I think you would be proud to have Benchmark in your community.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan for a staff report and then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stated by the applicant, this was previously heard at the September 21st hearing in 2002. Primary concerns raised at that time were traffic and parking. The traffic study submitted analyzed the traffic generation of the proposed assisted living facility with the existing bowling alley and other conventional business uses that would otherwise be in a business zone. The study shows that an assisted living facility generates less traffic than any other use analyzed in that study. Study was also reviewed by the town's traffic consultant as well as the New York State Department of Transportation. Study also included a parking analysis, which indicated that the proposed development exceeds anticipated parking needs with additional spaces required for the yet-to-be-open Hero Shop, the post office, and the Shannon Court Restaurant. Given that this application is an upzoning, the landscaping will be greatly enhanced. The anticipated adverse impacts are expected to be fewer than that of the bowling alley, and that the location meets much of the criteria listed in the town's code for the Residence C district. The staff recommends that the board grant the application subject to the attached covenants and restrictions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Mr. Brown?
Well, I have a couple of comments. The one thing that we're starting to see a lot more of the assisted living applications come in, and there were always heated debates at the public hearings when we first have them. And the one thing that I've been here 16 years, and some of the hardest decisions we had to make are with the assisted livings. And looking back now, I can see the two in Sayville, the one on Lakeland Avenue, the one on Broadway. They turned out to be very good neighbors and good applications, and they blend in with the neighborhoods, and they provide very good services. We did turn down one and go against it recently in Islip Bayshore because it was adjacent to a residential neighborhood. So I would just like to go on record that I think it's a good application and a good location on Montauk Highway.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I just also want to add a few things on this application. As Mr. Brown said, they're never easy, especially when there's change in the community, and obviously we had the community out for it. But, thank you sort of to the applicant in this, who from day one, there were a lot of changes we requested, even in terms of the building itself. You were amenable to them and you made those changes. In terms of Greenwood Avenue, I think we're going to see more greenery along Greenwood Avenue, which I just reminded you guys before you go to your next meeting, which is a public hearing, you might want to get out there and stress some of those things, those immediate neighbors, because you are making some real improvements on Greenwood Avenue. You are land banking those parking spots. You're also bringing in a use that's not that intense in terms of what could go there. And we are upzoning the property, which is a big plus. I think that needs to be explained as well to those neighbors. The crash gate, again, the furthest exit or entry point on Greenwood Avenue coming off of Montauk Highway is not going to be accessible unless the fire truck drives through it or they unlock it so they can get through it. You're giving those spaces or allowing those spaces to be used by the businesses in the community, which I think is a real big plus there as well. So, overall, it's not easy. And it's also very much different than the one that Mr. Brown mentioned that was in Islip Bayshore down in South Saxon. I mean, this is off of Montauk Highway. You do have your main entrance off of Montauk Highway. It is a big difference. So I think as tough as it is, it does work well for the community. I think it makes some good changes. I would hope that you in the next couple of weeks before you're back before the town, you take some of the changes I just mentioned and maybe try and get to those at least immediate neighbors, because there is going to be a lot of improvements there in terms of what it looks like and the greenery that's along there. And also how you're helping out the business community. So I just wanted to put that on the record. I'm not sure if there are any further comments from the board. Mr. Frugieri.
I just want to concur with the comments that my fellow board members have made. As I look at the aerial and have been out at the site, this site is a sea of asphalt. And, bowling alleys, if that were to ever to go out of business, we would end up here with a vacant eyesore in the community. And I've been familiar through personal experiences with 3 relatives in senior assisted living facilities. They are very low traffic users and aesthetically pleasing in the neighborhood. They are residential uses. So just wanted to back that up.
Thank you. Further question, Mr. Moriarty?
I would agree and concur with all the comments from my fellow board members. I'd also like to point out, though, I noticed in the site plan, there are going to be some walkways on the perimeter of the property. Those would be open to the local members of the community to take advantage of, correct? I don't know if you heard the question. I'm pointing out the walkways and the walking paths.
Yes, Mr. Moriarty. They're not actually intended to be, but just by inherently they are. It's not like as if the property is gated. So, any of the neighbors that want to come. By the way, to that point too, I think you'll be pleased to know that, when Benchmark comes, and we hope that we are coming, many times there's, community events where, the neighbors can come in and join because it's helpful to have a symbiotic relationship between the neighbors and the seniors, which often don't get as many visitors as we all know happens. We all know that, Christmas, Easter, and Mother's Day are typically the big days. And, but to your point, yes, the walkways would be open and we hope to have a nice symbiotic relationship with our neighbors.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point I'm trying to raise, that, developing that kind of relationship and bringing the community in to use community space. I don't know if there are corporate, I'm sure there might be different offices within the facility itself that could be used by local groups.
Many times it
and
works
community
out like a community
associations.
room and bring the neighbors in and, once or twice, a year having a, kind of a community event where the neighbors come in and again, it works for the seniors that live there. But I think you'll be very, very proud by what you'll see architecturally and use-wise. And thank you for your comments.
All right, thank you.
Further questions from the board? Further statements? Mr. Matamore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very familiar with the site. Been in it, on it, and through all the buildings there. Used to use the post office all the time. Went by it this afternoon. I just have this comment. And as you would expect, a bowling alley is a very active place with people coming in and out. The parking lot was full. So it's sort of a confirmation of the comments that we've heard tonight. And I appreciated the statements with regard to this organization, that they have a very good reputation for what they do and what they built. So I'm convinced that when it's up, whatever gainsayers we've had with regard to this thing will very quickly change their minds that this is a very good application. And indeed, one of our biggest problems in the town of Islip is our traffic is getting more and more intense. And there are concerns about that. And this is going in the other direction, which will reduce the numbers of cars, trips, and the like to this location. And so I agree with my colleagues that this is a very good application for this site. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Matamore. Anything further from the board? Is there a motion? Mr. Brown?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to grant the application subject to the CNRs.
Motion by Mr. Brown to grant the application subject to the CNR. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Moriarty. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Application is granted. Thank you. And I suggest in the next couple of weeks, you take some of those positive things out to that immediate area over there. There's been a lot of positive added to this. So thank you very much for your time.
Chairman, I want to thank each and every one members of the board. Thank you so much. We were really on tenterhooks about this and we worked very hard. My compliments to Sean, who's just been very, very wonderful, responsive, great degree of professionalism. And thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there anything further from the board? Is there a motion? Motion to adjourn, Mr. Moriarty, second by Mr. Matamore. All in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you.